All right, good morning, KOTA Territory. Welcome to your KOTA's Political Pulse. We are here again. I finally make another appearance after.
Yeah, where have you been?
You know what?
I've had to do all these interviews alone.
I've been lost
for
in
like the last.
I've been lost in the Black Hills somewhere. Good luck trying to find me out there. That's why I had to make my way back here. But here today, we are excited. We're having our first kind of panel show, which is very exciting. But with that being said, I'm Humberto Giles Sanchez. Joined by Blake. Introduce yourself, man.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm used to doing all this. I was going to let you do it just because it was good.
Joined by investigative reporter
You know how
Blake
hard
Troli.
it is to think of questions when you have to think of every question one-on-one.
Hey,
that's
fair.
what you put me through for the last few weeks.
That's fair. But
I appreciate that. But anyways, we were joined by Dan Ahlers. He is the executive director of the South Dakota Democratic Party, and Julian Beaudion. He is running for the U.S. Senate. And again, this race is shaping up for next year. And Julian, right now, it's you, independent candidate Brian Bangs. There hasn't been a Republican to announce right now. I think it's somewhat expected that current U.S. Senator in the seat you're running for, Mike Rounds, might announce his reelection, just as he just got an endorsement from President Trump. I think there's some momentum behind that. But we'll talk about you for right now. What is the platform that you're planning to run on?
Yeah, so I've been in law enforcement for a little bit over 13 years, 13 and a half years, both on the state side and also, done some cross-deputization work as a federal officer as well. And so really public safety and the safety of the citizens of South Dakota is one of my main priorities. But also, my father was a teacher for nearly 30 years before his passing. And so the Department of Education and really investing in our children and the needs of our children and teachers is near and dear to my heart. My mom was also a nurse with the VA system, and so our veterans, the support for veterans, not just with the VA, but also for their families as well, and their mental health is something that's been near and dear to my family's heart as well. So
I ask you this because Republicans have had some success with their elections over the last few years, and as somebody who's running as a Democrat, you have that law enforcement background. Do you think the Democrats split off that public safety law enforcement message over the last few years to their detriment?
I think there have been some conversations in other states. I'm not going to put South Dakota in that same territory, if you will. South Dakotans are quite a bit different, particularly when you talk about public safety. We all care about public safety. We all care about all that. And I use the term all loosely. Most of us care about, public safety, and most of us care about our law enforcement officials. And so I'm not going to put South Dakota in the same conversation that, folks were having nationally. We're just different.
And something that's interesting to me is that you're coming at this through a different lens. You're coming at this from the outside looking in, especially when it comes to veteran care, and that's a big topic here in South Dakota, especially with the Air Force Base here in western South Dakota. So really quickly, how has that kind of shifted your thought process? I know you mentioned a little bit about watching your mother kind of work there. How impactful is that to making the decision that you're running now? Yeah,
so my mom actually, she was a nurse, but very specifically, she was a psychiatric nurse. So again, the mental health and that care for the men and women that serve in the uniform is certainly a priority for us. And so when I first started with the Highway Patrol, I can remember folks having conversations about closing down the VA here on this side of the state. And we're still having that same type of conversation. What we're not talking about, though, is reinvesting in those types of resources to make sure that those who dedicated their lives to our country have the same type of dedication back from the government. And that's something that certainly I'll bring to the table as a candidate. But when I get to D.C., we're going to make sure that we're not just talking the talk, we're walking the walk, too.
I'm curious right now with President Trump's first few months now in office, if you see this as either an added challenge for you running against a Republican candidate, or if you actually see this as something that's going to give you some momentum behind your election.
I think it's a little bit of both. Because right now, in all honesty, there are many Republicans who are upset with what President Trump and the administration is doing. Equally upset, though, is how our congressional members are handling these types of situations. They're showing that they're out of touch with South Dakotans. They're showing that they're not even willing to have conversations with individuals. I've talked to so many people. We've done about 6 or 7 town halls across the state that have just been very specifically to listen to people. These are not solution-based quite yet. We want to listen to the concerns of people before we start developing platforms, because those solutions have to come from the people who are in the problem themselves. And Rounds is not doing that, Thune is not doing that, and neither is Johnson.
You know, just out of curiosity, what are some of those concerns that you've been hearing from the people?
You know, it's the same thing over and over. We're talking about the Department of Education being defunded. We're talking about Medicaid and Medicare loss, and then we're talking about cuts to the VA services. We have hundreds of employees who are at risk of losing their job from the VA services here. And if this particular VA service here on the west side of the state is shut down, you're talking veterans having to drive 4.5 hours to the closest and nearest hospital to get care. Then you talk about Medicaid and Medicare. A lot of rural counties are really concerned about the closure of their nursing homes, and what is mom and dad going to do? How are they going to get the care that they need? And so those are the conversations that we've been having. And again, there's been a lack of courage on the other side of the aisle to even face the issue, to even face the people who are facing these issues, to have the conversation.
If you were, let's just say you were senator right now, what would be the key concerns you'd have so far with President Trump's agenda, and where would you stand in the way and say, listen, no, this right here is going to have a totally negative impact on South Dakota? What would be your biggest concerns there so far with his agenda? You know,
he certainly has a way of disenfranchising people, and he does so by name calling. He does so by bullying. And as a state trooper, of course, we didn't stand for that. That's not something that South Dakotans stand for. That doesn't replicate our values. We are human beings who really value relationships. And so for me, I'm going to go in and say, listen, as much as you want to talk, this is not about you. This is about the people that we have to serve in South Dakota. And so, you can talk until, and my grandmother used to say, you can talk until you're blue in the face, but until you act on something, until you show me that you care, that doesn't mean anything to me. And so for me, it's less about talk and more about action.
I'm curious from your side, Dan, as somebody who's kind of bird's eye viewing the entire Democratic Party so far, what running points you see shaping up next year, where you see some missteps that you guys might be able to capitalize on.
Well, I think that Julian has laid some of that out, particularly with healthcare. We're looking at with this bill that is passed, you're looking at 10 million Americans that are potentially getting kicked off of healthcare. 10,000 South Dakotans that currently have Medicaid and access to health care for their children, for their families, that will no longer have care. It's already a stretched system where we're seeing nursing homes close, hospitals reduce services in rural areas across this state. And even though this bill has got it delayed, it's only going to make that problem worse. My dad just was rushed to the hospital here about a month ago, and he was told that there was no room at Rapid City at Monument, and there was no room at Campbell County Memorial Hospital in Gillette, Wyoming. That's simply not true. There's no pandemic going on. There's no big disaster going on where these hospitals are being rushed and bombarded. They're understaffed, and my dad's on Medicare. And as a former member of the Appropriations Committee in this state, I can tell you that these medical facilities look at who's on Medicaid and who's on Medicare and who's private pay, and they have to do a balance because they're running thin margins. They're running thin margins. They're not all big hospitals like what we were fortunate to have in Sioux Falls. These are medical facilities providing valuable services that are running on the margin. And they're looking at what does it take to keep these places open, and what is it going to look like if we have to close.
Well, just out of curiosity, it's another big topic here. Rural healthcare. It's one of the biggest talking points here in West River, South Dakota, just because, like you mentioned, a lot of it is rural. So at least when it comes to the impact, and going back to you real quick, how do you kind of plan to, fight for the rural communities out here in Western South Dakota, especially when it comes to situations like Dan here?
Yeah, here's one thing I think that maybe we take for granted a little bit is that this big, I call it the big disastrous bill. A lot of these things won't be implemented until November of next year. And so what that does for Democrats is it gives us time to take control of the House, but it also gives us time to take control of the Senate. And if we are fortunate enough to do both, it gives us the unique opportunity to repeal this bill. And so then we can actually start fighting for people instead of fighting against something. And so when you talk about, proactive legislation or proactive thoughts while engaging in policy, we have to be able to do that. But right now, the things that we can do is start building coalitions around our state to make sure that we have the strength in numbers when Democrats do take control of the House and the Senate. So, when it's time to come to D.C. and testify, when it's time to go to Pierre and testify, when it's even time to go to your city council and your county commission to talk about the needs of these services directly in your community, we have those numbers, we have the people ready to go.
You said you had 6 town halls so far?
I think it's been either 6 or 7.
Right.
I've almost lost count.
I'm just curious if you've run into any Republicans who are thinking about jumping ship and coming over to the Democratic side, and what they've told you has been their tipping point.
Yeah. So I joke with. So the quick answer, yes. We've come into contact with some Republicans at all of the town halls, and so I joke with them and I say, Republicans deserve to grow up too. So I know a lot of you guys want to be Democrats when you grow up. So come on over. We'll have this conversation. But here's the thing that I've seen more often than not is that people just want space to express their frustration. Whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, or in between, we've been able to provide that space for all of those individuals. Now, here's the other thing that's just a constant reality. Whether you're a Democrat or Independent who gets elected, you are supposed to work for all of the people in South Dakota. And so that's the message that we've been carrying across these town halls. But those are also the conversations that we've been having with both Democrats and Republicans alike.
And, talk a little bit about that, about this upcoming election next year. I mean, you mentioned a little bit outside in the studio as we were talking, so I'm going to steal your question here.
Oh, okay. I see. He comes right back to the show.
I start stealing the question.
Commits plagiarism right in front of my face. That's cool. All right.
No,
but
yeah.
No, here, I'll do one better. So I'll kind of prep it for you to ask. But it's talking about the candidates. How do you feel about, there being an independent this upcoming year?
Yeah, just so I'll polish the question.
Yes, there we go.
And we've had him on the show, Brian Banks. He's running as an independent, but he has previously run as a Democrat. And I think what he's getting at is what kind of impact you think this may have on you securing those votes. Are you concerned that he's going to be taking some votes?
Brian and I have had conversations prior to both of us actually announcing about whether or not he considered running at the time. Same thing with myself. And one of the things that I think people deserve is a seat at the table to have their voices heard. And so, Brian, of course, did run as a Democrat last time. Maybe all of the Democratic values didn't align with Brian and he wanted to switch to independent. I'm not sure his reasoning for doing so. But what I will say is that our country is a democracy, which means that everyone has the opportunity at any given time to switch parties and run based on, their thoughts and their beliefs. And so that's what I'd say about Brian. Good luck to everyone who hops in the race, for sure. We're going to run our race, which is not focusing on anyone else. We're focusing on the people of South Dakota. This is not about me. This is not about Brian, not about Trump or rounds. This is about the people of the state.
Dan, I want to go to you real quick on just all of the state seats or any local elections that you're looking at over the next year. What do you think are the key issues that you're trying to hone in on for South Dakotans? One thing that seems to come up a lot on this show is just affordability. It seems like affordability right now is top of mind for a lot of people in the state. I'm curious if that's one of your platforms and what the party's plans are there, and then if there's any other platforms that you've identified to really hone in on next year.
Well, I think one of the places the Democratic Party's failed is getting their message out there about what they do for working class families. We don't talk about it enough. We should, and we don't talk about our successes. We didn't during the last 4 years of the Biden administration. There were a lot of good things that happened, a lot of things that have helped this economy have what experts would say a soft landing. It didn't end in a recession. When you're going through a pandemic and you have all of this disruption in your economy, and then all of a sudden it all opens up really quickly and things run rampant and inflation runs wild, there were a lot of good things that happened. We need to be talking about those things. We have a lot of our state legislators that have done some great work making sure that folks that are homeless have access to the documentation and the resources they need so they can go out and get a job. Because that's what they said. That's what we hear. Well, they should go out and get a job. Well, it's not that easy when you don't have the things that you need to go and apply for a job. They're out there doing those things to make sure that they have access to that. They have fought for health care to make sure that people have access to affordable health care. The expansion of Medicaid was a very progressive ballot measuring constitutional amendment here in South Dakota. So those are the things that Democrats are fighting for, and we need to talk about those things a lot more. We don't just talk about it, we actually go out and do it. And now we have to show that we're hungry, we're there that we have the people of South Dakota's back. And you're going to see that in our candidates, from Julian to other folks that we'll announce for U.S. House and Governor later on down the road. Our candidates are focused on those types of working class issues.
And how is the search going right now for those candidates, both for the gubernatorial seat and for the congressional office?
Good. I wish they would announce sooner than what they do, because it really puts the pressure on us when the Republicans are all talking about who's running and they're all jockeying, and it is a little early. I mean, it is in the grand scheme of things, it is kind of early, but that urgency now is greater because you have all these Republican candidates that are talking. But we have 2 or 3 people that are seriously considering a run for governor. We've got about 3 to 4 people that are looking at U.S. House. So these are good things. And as Julian said, run, everyone run. I mean, I think people deserve to have a variety. They deserve to have good choices. I like the idea of possibly having a gubernatorial primary or a U.S. House primary, because it is building excitement and momentum, and it's highlighting our candidates. And we really get a chance to talk about what we will bring to the table, what we offer. When you look at the last, the history of South Dakota and the last great changes, the big changes and reforms in state government happened when Democrats took over. We have a USD School of Medicine because of the Democrats in the 1970s. We have the retirement system we have today in South Dakota because of those same Democrats. We have a food program that feeds people across the world because of the great work of people like George McGovern and Bob Dole, people that knew how to cross party lines and work together. And our Democrats have shown over and over and over again that they can get that done. That's why 9 Democrats in Pierre were able to get a lot of work done. They passed more bills and did more work than they had in the previous 3 sessions. That's quite an accomplishment.
So I pointed to him, he pointed to me. See, this is what I've had to do, all of these questions on my own. I had to steer in headlights for like 20 seconds. But no, I do have like plenty of questions that we could continue with for both of you guys. I mean, we were kind of talking about this off camera. I'm curious if you've identified any national candidates that the Democrats should be looking at for the next presidential election. I think that is something that is on everybody's mind right now, is it's interesting because President Trump, I mean, his second term, this is his second term, so he's terming out. So there's a lot of conversations on that end, but it almost seems like right now there's more interest in who the Democrats are going to run. And this is as California Governor Gavin Newsom's profile has been raising, some other key Democrats' profile has been raising. I'm curious who you guys think the party should be eyeing right now.
Yeah, for a couple different reasons. I'm really a big fan of Wes Moore, who's the governor of Maryland. We talked about my background in law enforcement, but also my passion for our veterans. Wes Moore himself is a veteran, and he has chosen to reinvest or make an additional investment into public safety in his state. And so what they've seen is that not just the investment in public safety, but also an additional investment in education has led to a drastic decrease in public safety concerns. We just saw, and I'm not sure exactly what the numbers are, but we just saw the crime rate drop drastically in Maryland. Same thing's happening out in Illinois right now because those states, those Democratic governors, those leaders are choosing to invest in the necessary key points such as public safety and education, instead of what our leaders are doing here in South Dakota, which is trying to tear that particular system down. And so I'm big fans of Wes Moore because of that, and I know it makes a safer community. I know it makes a smarter community. It builds up leaders. It builds up small businesses. Those are the things that we need to look forward to as the future of our country.
One of the local issues that's been getting a lot of press, and I know this wouldn't be something you handle in the U.S. Senate because this is a statewide issue. Dan, I'm curious your thoughts, and Julian, yours as well, even though this might not fall underneath your office, but property tax. This ate up a lot of oxygen. Last legislative session, they're having a summer study on it. There's a lot of proposals being thrown at this. we obviously live in a supermajority state. We hear a lot of the Republican talking points on what should be done about this. What would you guys do to address this issue? This is something that, we have heard people say, some elderly people are going back to work to pay their property taxes. Others are just concerned about the financial burden this is putting on them. What do you think needs to be done on this?
Yeah, well, it's certainly, make no mistake that property tax is a very big issue for a lot of South Dakotans, especially in the population centers where things are growing. I own a cap home that was purchased out of a Sears and Roebuck catalog. There are a lot of homes that are just like mine. And I can tell you that mine is worth $100,000 more than someone who has the exact same house that's living 20 miles down the road in a very rural area of South Dakota. And that means our taxes are different for the exact same home. There are flaws with the system, and it does need to be addressed. But it's not as simple as just saying we're going to lower your property taxes, because that has a huge ramification at the local level. It also has a significant impact on our ability to fund education because of the Cutler-Gabriel Act. So whatever the state decides to do from the state side for funding, that triggers the Cutler-Gabriel Act, which changes the mill levies. So even if you did a property tax reduction, your mill levies could change and you could still be in a similar situation because the state decided not to give as much money as it did the previous year. So, and we have to focus on broadening and equaling out our tax structure. We're so heavily dependent on sales tax already in this state that when you have a down year, as I'm hearing from businesses out here locally, I just had breakfast at a small cafe in the Black Hills this morning, and I asked them how things were going. They said their business is down 20%.
Did they allude anything to that? I'm just curious now.
They didn't really give any reason. They just said it was down, and it's been down all year. And they're hoping. Well, we can't fund a state on hope. Mm-hmm. So when you have we're so heavily dependent on that sales tax, that creates a huge problem. The sales or the shortfall that they predicted this year, which didn't come to fruition, by the way, was actually man-made by the legislators when they reduced that, that 0.03%, and they go, oh, it's the biggest tax reduction in South Dakota history, which is, but they created that deficit that they were out there talking about during legislative session. That's a man-made one, and we stand to do the same thing with property taxes if we don't have a comprehensive strategy and plan to equal out and make our tax structure fair.
There's a couple things for me that come into play. I think, and this is something that Democrats and Republicans have fought over for generations. Because our state is so heavily reliant on two things, sales tax and also tourism, I think there is a way to structure a tax system around small incremental increases in those areas so that our citizens don't have to brunt the weight when it comes to paying additional property taxes. We're in a situation now where there's going to be an increase. There has to be an increase somewhere. I don't know where it's going to come from, but we've put ourselves, just like Dan said, this is a man-made issue. We've put ourselves in this position. But I think there's a trend that I am concerned with that we see out in Sioux Falls, and I've talked to some people yesterday. We're seeing that here in Rapid City. I know Spearfish is seeing it, to where we're giving tax breaks to developers. Mm-hmm. And so let's figure out that system to where we're not giving the tax breaks to developers, but instead we're giving the tax breaks to the citizens of South Dakota, to where we can make living more affordable.
And, I am very curious, at least him bringing up that point, with other tourist towns, at least here in the upper Midwest region, such as Fargo, you have Rapid City, you have Sheridan. I'm really curious to see how we might have to follow up on that at some point.
Just the tourism. I was curious if they had pointed at anything or said anything that stuck out to you about that. You're talking to a couple people who've got other news stories to do when we get done.
And I'm not going to out him on your show, but I do have a close friend who works in the Department of Tourism, and he did tell me that things were down this year. And it's to be expected. I mean, we heard about how it was all going to be fixed. Day one, it was all going to be fixed. All the world's problems, from Israel and Palestine to the Ukraine war to inflation, it was all going to be fixed day one. Well, it hasn't. And today, You have your consumers paying more for their summer barbecue stuff. You have beef up 8%. Gas prices are climbing up again. You guys pay 50 cents a gallon more here than I do in Sioux Falls. Why? Because I think in part they know they can, but people are paying higher costs. Costs are not going down at the rate that they said they would, right? Inflation is still there. And with the tariffs, no matter how they turn out, those tariffs are going to have an impact on us. We're going to pay for those. This bill that Congress just voted on is going to raise our national debt by $3.4 trillion, and that's from a nonpartisan congressional budget group. For states like South Dakota, where we rely 40 to 43% of our state budget as federal funding, that's going to come home to roost, and that's going to fall on the taxpayers of South Dakota. So these problems and these needs don't go away. And to ignore them, to exacerbate the problems knowing that they already exist, is just irresponsible. And we need to elect leaders that are serious about real solutions and to do the hard work, because none of us have all the answers. We're going to have to work together to figure that out.
I am curious, Julian, if you've heard any feedback from farmers, from ranchers on the tariff issue and how it's impacted them. And I'm curious if you've seen some team switching possibly there with the tariffs.
Yeah, so I hadn't necessarily seen any team switching yet. I will say that there's a concern from every single farmer that I've talked to. There has not necessarily been a direct impact yet because of the roller coaster ride they were on with tariffs. 1 month there's a tariff, the next month there's not. But what I have heard is that relationships, and we know South Dakota is really big on relationships. Our farmers have spent over 30 years building relationships with our trade partners, particularly the trade partners in Mexico and Canada. And so with this unknown tariff situation, those relationships have diminished. They're gone. Talked to one farmer, he was talking about a relationship that he spent 35 years building with 2 trade partners over in China, and they will not give him a call back. This is a long-term issue that we're dealing with, and the hard work of our farmers and ranchers are really going down the drain because of the uncertainty of this tariff situation. And so that's not something we want to put, our main economic driver in the position to have to be facing. I want to maybe go back just real quick and touch on something that Dan said, because I think it's important for me for sure, and I'm going to get personal, maybe a little bit vulnerable in this moment too. My wife and I are small business owners, and so when Dan was talking about this cafe seeing a decrease in 20% in sales in Sioux Falls, we're on the main drag. We're on Phillips Avenue. And we've also seen, a decrease in sales at right about 20–25% as well. Things are hard for small business owners, but I make that point to say our farmers are in the same position. And it would be irresponsible of us to think that our farmers are not small business owners as well. And so this is not just about small businesses on Main Street, on Phillips Avenue. This is also a conversation that we need to be having with our farmers.
Do you think Republicans at some point in Congress and in the Senate, so in the House and the Senate, do you think they're going to start splitting? I mean, largely we have seen almost a unison with a lot of the moves that President Trump has made. But I'm curious, as we talk about the tariff situation, as this goes down the road, if we're going to start seeing a break and a little bit of a fracture there.
For our sake, I hope they keep following. I hope they keep following in line, because what that does, of course, again, is it puts people, the citizens, the voters, in position to say, we don't want that. I've talked to so many people that said, I didn't vote for this. I don't know what's happening. I didn't vote for this. And while, Democrats can turn around and say the sly thing, you did vote for it, right? I mean, technically, yes. But I understand exactly where they're coming from. They voted for the promise that Dan was talking about, those promises of the day one that Trump made. And those promises are being broken over and over and over again. And so that's what Republicans right now are really, if I can say this word, really pissed off about. They're not necessarily pissed off at Trump. They're pissed off that Trump is breaking the promise that he made to them. They're also pissed off about, people like Thune and Rounds standing up on behalf of Trump and not on behalf of the people. And so, if they continue to fall in line with Trump and not necessarily stick to their conservative values, what true conservative values are, then we're going to see a switch in the voters, and that's what we hope to see.
And just here, because we have a couple of minutes left, kind of bringing back this conversation back to here to South Dakota, at least when it comes to the governor race next year, how's that looking like for the Democrats?
I'm excited. There's about 2 or 3 people that are really interested in running. I think they would all be good candidates, and I wish they had announced now, because it would certainly make my life a lot easier. But they announce in their time, and we respect that. We're here to work with all of our candidates and really try to have a good support network and infrastructure that they need to be successful in November.
All right. Blake, do you have anything else to say? Anything else to ask?
Yeah, okay, I think since we're down to
one more question.
I got one left? Okay, yes. Fine. All right, so we got one left. You know what, I do want to end with this. Just, I'm curious what you guys make right now of the party relations in D.C. specifically, as you see the Republicans and the Democrats in the House and the Senate, where you think those relationships are and where both of you guys think those need to move.
Yeah, I guess I can give you maybe just a quick answer on that. I think both Republicans and Democrats have to take a hard look in the mirror, particularly on the national level. There's been a lot of mistakes made by both parties. Dan talked about some of the mistakes and the failures from the Democratic Party on the communication side. I think there's a lot more at bay than just communicating. I think, our policies sometimes have to be better. Again, I'll go back to what we believe in South Dakota. Our relationships have to be better. Compromise used to be a word that we really love to throw around when we talk about politics, but neither side is willing to compromise anymore. And compromise is really what gets things done for the citizens. And so I think we have to come back to a sense of, valuing each other as human beings first, building those relationships, and seeing how we can come to a conclusion that doesn't bend our values, doesn't break our values, but it adheres to the values of the people that we represent.
Yeah, and I think if you want real lasting change, we cannot afford to fall back to the extremes. The hardworking Democrats and the Republicans that want real good lasting change are going to have to find a way to shake off the shackles of partisanship and really come together. Because when we see that, good things happen. I can go back to McGovern and Bob Dole. Look at the work that they did together in Congress. Look at their lasting legacy. I mean, wouldn't you want that if you were an elected official? If you were do you want it to be the Donald Trump or the Marjorie Taylor Greene? Is that what you want your legacy to be? Wouldn't you want it to be something like feeding children across the world, making sure that hungry people are fed? The poverty rate in the world has declined over the last 4 decades because of work of 2 people that were able to get past that partisanship and do some good work together. You have Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton that found ways to work together. Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan found ways to work together. And I think that if you're going to have something positive and really move forward and do something good for the American people, for the people of South Dakota, that's what has to happen.
All right, well, thank you to both of you for joining us here on KOTA's Political Pulse. It's been a pleasure to talk to each of you this morning.
Thank you.
And Blake, I guess I'll be here again next week.
Okay.
So I'll promise that.
Can I count on that?
Yes.
Okay.
Otherwise, this new segment is where in the Black Hills is Umberto.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. All right, but for you watching, thank you again for tuning in to KOTA's Political Pulse this Monday. We'll see you right back here next week. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your morning.